There is a moment in every person's life when someone disrespects them so deeply, so casually, so publicly, that something inside shifts forever. Maybe it was a colleague who dismissed your idea in a meeting and then repeated it 5 minutes later as their own. Maybe it was a family member who belittled your dreams at the dinner table while everyone else laughed along. Maybe it was a partner who spoke to you with a tone so cutting, so cold, that the words stayed inside your chest for weeks like shrapnel. And in that moment, every instinct inside you screamed to react, to defend yourself, to raise your voice, to prove your worth, to fire back with something sharper, something louder, something that would make them feel the same sting they just planted inside you. But here is the truth that almost nobody teaches you, the truth that separates the truly powerful from the perpetually wounded. The most devastating response to disrespect is not a clever comeback. It is not rage. It is not even walking away with a dramatic exit. The most devastating, the most psychologically disarming, the most permanently transformative response to disrespect is silence. Not the silence of weakness, not the silence of someone who is too afraid to speak, not the silence of someone swallowing their pain and pretending everything is fine.
No.
I am talking about a different kind of silence entirely. A silence that communicates without words. A silence that says, I see exactly what you are doing, and I have decided that you are not worth the energy it would take to respond. A silence so deliberate, so composed, so controlled, that the person who disrespected you is left standing in the wreckage of their own behavior with no one to fight, no one to blame, and no way to escape the discomfort of what they just revealed about themselves. This is not a technique, this is not a trick. This is one of the oldest and most profound principles of human power. Understood by emperors and philosophers thousands of years ago, and yet almost completely forgotten in a world that teaches us to be louder, faster, more reactive, more outraged, more defensive at every turn. And today, we are going to explore this principle so deeply that by the time you reach the end, you will never respond to disrespect the same way again. Let me tell you something that most people never stop to consider. When someone disrespects you, they are not actually making a statement about you. They are making a statement about themselves. They are revealing their insecurity, their need for control, their desperation to feel superior, their emotional immaturity, their inability to handle their own inner turmoil without projecting it onto someone else. Disrespect is never really about the person receiving it. It is always about the person delivering it. But here is where the trap lies. The moment you react, the moment you raise your voice, the moment you defend yourself with anger or emotion, you unknowingly validate their behavior. You give them exactly what they wanted. You confirm that their words had power over you. You step into the arena they created, and the moment you do that, you have already lost, not because your response was wrong, but because you accepted a game that was never designed for you to win. Think about it. When someone insults you and you fire back, what happens? It escalates. It becomes a war of egos. It becomes about who can be louder, sharper, more hurtful. And even if you win that exchange, even if you deliver the perfect comeback that leaves them speechless, what have you actually gained? A moment of satisfaction, maybe. A brief rush of adrenaline. But underneath that, something darker has happened. You have shown them that they have access to your emotions. You have shown them that they can reach inside you and pull out a reaction whenever they choose. And that is not power, that is slavery. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled one of the most powerful empires in human history, understood this at a level that most people never reach. He wrote in his private journal, not for publication, not for fame, but for himself, as a daily practice of self-mastery. And one of the things he wrote was this: the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. Think about the depth of that statement. Here is a man who commanded armies, who had the power to destroy anyone who disrespected him with a single word. And yet his private philosophy, the one he lived by when no one was watching, was that the greatest victory is not to defeat your enemy but to refuse to become them, to refuse to let their behavior dictate yours, to refuse to let their darkness pull you into a darkness of your own. And this is what silence does. It is not passivity. It is the ultimate act of self-governance. It is the decision to remain sovereign over your own emotional state, regardless of what someone else does or says. It is the recognition that your peace is more valuable than their provocation. And when you truly internalize this, something extraordinary happens. You stop giving people the power to control you. Now I want you to think about the people in your life who you respect the most. Not the loudest people, not the most aggressive people, not the people who always have a sharp response ready. Think about the people who carry a certain weight to their presence. The people who, when they walk into a room, you feel something shift. The people who do not chase attention, but somehow command it effortlessly. What is it about them? What is the quality they possess that makes them different from everyone else? If you look closely, you will notice something remarkable. These people are almost always measured in their words. They do not react impulsively. They do not engage in petty arguments. They do not feel the need to prove themselves in every conversation. They listen more than they speak. And when they do speak, every word carries significance because it was chosen deliberately, not fired reactively. This is not coincidence. This is the psychological architecture of genuine authority. Human beings are wired at a primal level to respect what is scarce and to devalue what is abundant. This is true for resources, for attention, for time, and it is absolutely true for words. When you speak constantly, when you react to everything, when you defend yourself against every slight, your words lose their weight. They become noise. They become background. People stop listening, not because what you say lacks value, but because there is simply too much of it. But when you are selective, when you respond with silence where others would respond with chaos, your words become rare, and rare things are valued. Rare things are respected. Rare things are feared. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers who ever lived, said something that captures this perfectly. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And this connects to silence in a way that most people never consider. When you respond to disrespect with silence, you leave the other person alone with their imagination. You do not give them the satisfaction of knowing how you feel. You do not give them the data they need to calibrate their next attack. You leave them in uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most psychologically uncomfortable states a human being can experience. When you fire back at someone, you give them closure. You tell them exactly where they stand. You show them the impact of their words. But when you respond with silence, you deny them that closure. They do not know if you are angry, hurt, amused, indifferent, or planning something they cannot see. And that ambiguity eats at them far more than any response ever could. This is not cruelty. This is wisdom. This is understanding how the human mind works and choosing to operate at a level that most people do not even know exists. Let me take you deeper into something that very few people understand about the psychology of disrespect. When someone disrespects you, they are operating from a specific emotional state. They are either trying to elevate themselves by diminishing you, or they are projecting their own internal pain onto the nearest available target, or they are testing your boundaries to see how much they can get away with. In every single one of these cases, the person disrespecting you needs something from you in order for their strategy to work. They need your reaction. They need your emotional engagement. They need you to either crumble, which confirms their superiority, or to explode, which justifies their behavior and allows them to paint you as the problem. Without your reaction, their entire strategy collapses. It is like watching someone swing a sword at empty air. The energy they put into the attack has nowhere to go. It rebounds back on them. It makes them look foolish, impotent, desperate. And this is why silence is not just a defensive strategy. It is an offensive one. It forces the other person to sit with the weight of their own actions, without any distraction, without any counterattack to focus on, without any narrative to construct, in which they are the victim or the hero. They are left standing alone with the raw truth of what they just did, and for most people, that is unbearable. This is the mechanism that Epictetus, the former slave who became one of the most influential philosophers in history, understood better than almost anyone. Epictetus was born into slavery. He was owned by another human being. He was beaten, mistreated, disrespected in the most extreme ways imaginable. And yet he developed a philosophy of inner freedom that has outlasted empires. One of his most powerful teachings was this: it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But most people misunderstand this. They think Epictetus was saying that you should simply endure whatever happens to you. that you should grit your teeth and bear it. That is not what he was saying at all. He was saying something far more radical. He was saying that between what happens to you and how you respond, there is a space. And in that space lies your freedom. In that space lies your power. In that space lies everything that makes you who you are. And when you choose silence in the face of disrespect, you are living in that space. You are exercising the highest form of human freedom, the freedom to choose your own response regardless of the provocation. You are refusing to be a puppet whose strings can be pulled by anyone with a sharp tongue or a cruel intention. You are declaring, without saying a word, that your inner state is your own territory, and no one enters without your permission. Now I want to address something that many people struggle with, because it is one of the most common objections to this philosophy. People say, "But if I stay silent, won't they think I am weak? Won't they think they can walk all over me? Won't they think they won?" And I understand this fear, I genuinely do. Because we live in a culture that equates loudness with strength, aggression with power, and reaction with resilience. We are taught from childhood that if someone pushes you, you push back harder. If someone insults you, you insult them better. If someone disrespects you, you make sure they know they made a mistake. But here is the paradox that this culture never reveals. The people who react to every provocation are not strong. They are controlled, they are puppets dancing to someone else's tune. Every time they react, they prove that someone else has the remote control to their emotions. Every time they fire back, they confirm that they can be manipulated into any emotional state at any time by anyone who knows which buttons to push. That is not strength, that is vulnerability disguised as toughness. True strength, the kind of strength that actually changes the dynamics of power in your relationships, your career, your life, is the ability to remain unmoved when everything around you is trying to move you. It is the ability to stay centered when someone is deliberately trying to knock you off balance. It is the ability to look at someone who just disrespected you and feel, genuinely feel, not perform but actually feel, a deep calm that comes from knowing that their opinion does not define you, their words do not diminish you, and their behavior does not control you. And let me tell you something about how other people actually perceive this kind of silence. It does not look like weakness, not even close. When someone disrespects you and you respond with composed silence, when you simply look at them without anger, without hurt, without any need to justify yourself, it creates an incredibly powerful psychological effect. The other person suddenly feels exposed. They realize that their attack did not land. They realize that you are operating on a completely different level. And more importantly, everyone watching, because there is almost always someone watching, sees the contrast between their loss of control and your possession of it. They see someone flailing and someone standing still. And they know instinctively, at a gut level, who holds the real power in that exchange. I have seen this dynamic play out thousands of times in real life. In boardrooms, in families, in friendships, in romantic relationships. The person who maintains composure in the face of disrespect almost always emerges with more respect, more authority, and more influence than they had before. Not because they did something dramatic, but because they did something rare. They demonstrated that they could not be destabilized. And in a world full of reactive, impulsive, emotionally unstable people, that quality is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily magnetic. But let me be very clear about something. The silence I am describing is not suppression. It is not about pushing down your emotions, pretending they do not exist, and wearing a mask of calm while you are screaming inside. That is toxic, that is unhealthy, that will destroy you from within. The silence I am talking about comes from a genuine internal shift. It comes from actually understanding at a deep level that most disrespect says nothing about you and everything about the person delivering it. It comes from having done the inner work to reach a place where your self-worth is not dependent on how other people treat you. It comes from building an identity that is rooted so deeply in your own values, your own principles, your own sense of self, that external provocation simply cannot reach the core of who you are. And this is where the real journey begins. Because this kind of silence is not something you can fake. You cannot pretend to be unaffected when you are devastated inside. People will see through it. They will sense the tension in your body, the forced calmness in your voice, the subtle trembling of suppressed rage. Authentic silence, powerful silence, the kind that actually shifts the dynamics of your relationships and your life, requires genuine inner transformation. It requires you to do something that most people are not willing to do. It requires you to examine why disrespect affects you so deeply in the first place. And this is where we need to go deeper, much deeper. Why does disrespect hurt so much? Have you ever really asked yourself that question? Not on the surface level, not the obvious answer of, well, nobody likes being disrespected, but really truly asked yourself why certain words from certain people can ruin your entire day, your entire week, your entire month. The answer lies in something that most people never examine: their relationship with their own self-worth. Here is the brutal truth. Disrespect only has power over you to the extent that part of you believes it might be true. If someone walked up to you on the street and said, "You are a terrible astronaut," you would probably laugh. You would not feel hurt. You would not feel the need to defend yourself. Why? Because you have no emotional investment in being seen as a good astronaut. It is irrelevant to your identity. But if someone says you are a bad parent, a bad partner, a failure, a nobody, if someone says you are not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy of respect, those words hit different. They land in a different place. They find a wound that already exists and press on it. And that wound, that vulnerability, that soft spot where disrespect hurts the most, is always connected to a part of you that already doubts yourself. This is not an accusation. This is not a judgment. This is the human condition. Every single person walking this earth carries wounds of self-doubt. Areas where they are not quite sure of their own value. Places where they need external validation to feel okay about themselves. And these are the exact places where disrespect finds its target. So when someone disrespects you and it hurts, the pain is not really coming from them. It is coming from you. It is coming from the part of you that wonders if maybe they are right. It is coming from the gap between who you are and who you wish you were. It is coming from the unfulfilled need for someone, anyone, to confirm that you are enough. And this is why most people react so strongly to disrespect. They are not really fighting the other person. They are fighting their own self-doubt. They are trying to silence the voice inside that whispers maybe they have a point. And so they lash out, not to defeat the other person, but to drown out their own inner critic. Marcus Aurelius understood this with remarkable clarity. He wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." He was pointing to something profound. The damage we do to ourselves through our reactions is almost always greater than the damage done by the original offense. The insult lasts a moment, but the anger, the resentment, the obsessive replaying of the event, the fantasies of revenge, the sleepless nights, the poisoned mood that spreads into every area of your life, those consequences can last for days, weeks, months, even years. You are not punishing the other person with your anger. You are punishing yourself. You are drinking poison and hoping the other person gets sick. And this is where silence becomes not just a social strategy, but a form of self-healing. When you choose silence instead of reaction, you are breaking a cycle that most people do not even know they are trapped in. You are interrupting the pattern of external event, emotional reaction, destructive behavior that has been running on autopilot for most of your life. You are stepping out of the machine. You are becoming the observer of your own experience rather than a slave to it. And in that moment of observation, something extraordinary becomes possible. You can actually look at the disrespect, examine it, understand where the pain is coming from, and begin to heal the wound that made you vulnerable to it in the first place. This is the work that nobody wants to do. This is the work that no self-help book can do for you. This is the deep, uncomfortable, transformative work of genuine self-knowledge. And the Stoics were masters of it. Let me tell you about a concept that Seneca explored extensively. Something that I think is one of the most underappreciated insights in all of philosophy. Seneca talked about the idea of voluntary discomfort. He would deliberately practice poverty, sleeping on hard surfaces, eating the simplest food, wearing rough clothing, not because he had to, but because he wanted to inoculate himself against the fear of losing comfort. He wanted to prove to himself that he could endure difficulty, that his happiness was not dependent on external conditions, that he was free even in deprivation. And this principle applies directly to the question of disrespect and silence. When you practice remaining silent in the face of provocation, you are doing the same thing Seneca did. You are deliberately exposing yourself to discomfort. The discomfort of not reacting, the discomfort of not defending yourself, the discomfort of sitting with your emotions without acting on them, in order to build a deeper and more resilient relationship with yourself. Every time you successfully resist the urge to react, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than the impulse. You prove that you are not controlled by your emotions. You prove that you have a choice. And over time, this practice transforms you at a fundamental level. The things that used to devastate you begin to lose their power. The people who used to control your mood with a single word begin to feel irrelevant. The need for external validation that used to drive so much of your behavior begins to dissolve, and in its place something new grows, something quiet, something solid, something unshakable, self-respect. Not the kind that comes from other people treating you well, not the kind that depends on praise, recognition, or approval, but the kind that comes from knowing, deep in your bones, that you are the master of your own inner world, that no one can take your peace without your consent, that you have built a fortress inside yourself that no insult, no betrayal, no act of cruelty can breach. This is what the Stoics meant by the inner citadel. It is not a metaphor. It is a real, tangible, experiential state of being that you can build through deliberate practice. And silence in the face of disrespect is one of the most powerful bricks you can lay in that foundation. Now I want to take this conversation into territory that is rarely explored, even by people who study Stoicism seriously. I want to talk about the relationship between silence and identity. Most people build their identity from the outside in. They look at how other people treat them, how society values them, what roles they play in their families and communities, and they construct a sense of self based on these external inputs. If people treat them with respect, they feel respectable. If people treat them with contempt, they feel contemptible. If people ignore them, they feel invisible. Their identity is essentially a mirror reflecting whatever the world projects onto them. And this is incredibly dangerous, because it means that your sense of who you are is entirely in the hands of other people. It means that anyone, at any time, can alter your identity simply by changing how they treat you. One cruel comment from a stranger can send you spiraling into self-doubt. One rejection from a potential partner can make you question your worth. One dismissive look from a colleague can make you feel small and insignificant. This is not a life, this is a prison. And the bars are made of other people's opinions. The Stoics proposed something radically different. They proposed that identity should be built from the inside out, that your sense of who you are should be rooted in your own values, your own character, your own principles, not in how others perceive or treat you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not the quality of other people's thoughts about you, not the quality of other people's treatment of you. The quality of your own thoughts, your own internal narrative, own relationship with yourself." And this is what silence teaches you. Every time you choose not to react to disrespect, you are making a radical statement about your identity. You are saying, I am not defined by what you say about me. I am not defined by how you treat me. I am defined by how I respond, and I choose to respond with sovereignty. You are separating your sense of self from the opinions and behaviors of others. You are cutting the strings that have been controlling you since childhood. You are becoming, perhaps for the first time in your life, genuinely free. But let us go even deeper, because there is a dimension to this that touches on something almost spiritual, something that the ancient philosophers understood but rarely stated explicitly. When you master the art of silence in the face of disrespect, you begin to see people differently, not with anger, not with contempt, not with superiority, but with a strange, deep compassion, because you begin to understand that the person who disrespects you is suffering. They are in pain. Their cruelty is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of a wound they have not healed. It is a sign of an insecurity they have not faced. It is a sign of a fear they have not overcome. Happy people do not go around disrespecting others. Secure people do not feel the need to diminish those around them. Fulfilled people do not derive pleasure from causing pain. When someone disrespects you, they are showing you their wound. They are telling you, without words, I am hurting, and I do not know how to deal with it, so I am going to make you hurt too. And when you see this, truly see it, something remarkable happens. The anger dissolves, the hurt fades. Not because you are suppressing it, but because you genuinely understand what is happening. You are no longer taking their behavior personally. You are seeing it for what it is, a reflection of their inner state, not a commentary on your worth. And from this place of understanding, silence becomes effortless. You do not have to force yourself not to react. You simply do not feel the need to. It is like watching a child throw a tantrum. You do not take it personally. You do not feel threatened. You do not feel the need to throw a tantrum back. You see the behavior for what it is, an expression of distress, and you respond with calm, steady, compassionate presence. This is not weakness. This is the highest expression of strength a human being is capable of. This is what Aristotle meant when he talked about the virtue of magnanimity, greatness of soul. The magnanimous person in Aristotle's philosophy is someone who is not easily moved by external events because they have cultivated such a deep and stable relationship with their own worth that the opinions and behaviors of others simply cannot disturb their equilibrium. They are not arrogant. They are not dismissive. They are not cold. They are simply rooted. They are grounded in something deeper than the surface-level drama of human interaction. And they respond to the world from that depth with a calm authority that commands respect without demanding it. I want to tell you something about what happens in the weeks and months after you begin practicing this kind of deliberate silence, something that no one prepares you for. At first, it is incredibly difficult. Your body is wired to react. Your nervous system has been trained over decades to respond to perceived threats with fight or flight. When someone disrespects you, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, adrenaline floods your system, your brain starts generating responses before you even consciously decide to engage. Overriding this biological programming is not easy. It takes practice. It takes patience. It takes a level of self-awareness that most people never develop. And in the beginning, you will fail. You will react when you intended to stay silent. You will say things you regret. You will fall back into old patterns. And that is okay, because this is not about perfection. It is about direction. Every time you catch yourself reacting and choose, even a second later than you would have liked, to stop, to breathe, to return to center, you are rewiring your brain. You are creating new neural pathways. You are training your nervous system to respond differently. And over time, with consistent practice, the default begins to shift. The automatic reaction becomes automatic composure. The impulsive response becomes deliberate stillness. The need to prove yourself becomes a quiet confidence that needs no proof. And then something even more remarkable happens. The people around you begin to change. Not because you changed them, but because you changed the dynamic. People who used to disrespect you start to hesitate. They sense that something is different. They feel on an instinctive level that you are no longer the same person they used to provoke so easily. Some of them will test you more aggressively at first, trying to find the old buttons, trying to get the old reaction. And when they fail, when they push and you remain unmoved, something fascinating occurs. They either respect you more or they remove themselves from your life. And either outcome is a victory, because the people who respect you more will treat you accordingly. And the people who remove themselves were only in your life because they could use you as an emotional punching bag. And now that you have taken that function away, they have no reason to stay. Your silence has become a filter, automatically sorting the people in your life into those who genuinely value you, and those who only valued the control they had over you. And this is one of the most liberating experiences a human being can have. To look around and realize that the people still standing beside you are there because they genuinely care, not because they can manipulate you. There is another dimension to this that I want to explore, because it connects to something that is deeply relevant to modern life. We live in a culture of constant noise. Social media, news cycles, opinion pieces, comment sections, arguments, debates, hot takes, reactions, counter-reactions, the endless cacophony of everyone saying everything all the time. And within this noise, silence has become almost revolutionary. To not have an opinion on everything, to not react to every provocation, to not engage in every argument. to not share every thought that crosses your mind. In a world addicted to noise, silence is power, and this extends beyond interpersonal relationships into your relationship with yourself. Most people cannot sit with silence. They cannot be alone with their own thoughts. They fill every moment with distraction, with stimulation, with input, because the moment things get quiet, the moment the noise stops, they are confronted with something they have been running from: themselves, their fears, their doubts, their unresolved pain, their unfulfilled dreams, their authentic feelings about their life, their choices, their relationships. Silence forces you to face all of it. And most people would rather fight a war with the entire world than face a single moment of honest self-reflection. This is why the Stoic practice of silence is not just about how you respond to others. It is about how you respond to yourself. It is about creating space in your life for the kind of deep, honest, uncomfortable self-examination that leads to genuine transformation. Marcus Aurelius did this every day. Every morning and every evening he would sit with himself, examine his thoughts, evaluate his actions, confront his weaknesses, and recommit to his principles. This was not a pleasant activity. It was not relaxing. It was rigorous, demanding, sometimes painful. But it was the practice that made him one of the most respected leaders in human history. Not because he was the smartest or the strongest, but because he knew himself better than anyone else knew him. And that self-knowledge made him unmanipulable, unprovocable, and ultimately unbreakable. Let me share with you a distinction that I think is critically important and often misunderstood. There is a difference between silence as a response and silence as a lifestyle. Silence as a response is what we have been discussing, the choice to not react when provoked, to not engage when disrespected, to not fire back when attacked. This is powerful and important. But silence as a lifestyle is something even deeper. It is the cultivation of an internal quietness that persists regardless of external circumstances. It is not about never speaking. It is about speaking only when your words improve upon the silence. It is about developing such a rich and stable inner world that you no longer need the constant input and validation of the external world to feel complete. People who cultivate this kind of silence carry a presence that is almost impossible to describe, but immediately recognizable. You have met these people. You know the feeling. When they enter a room, something shifts. When they speak, people listen, not because they are loud, but because they are rare. When they look at you, you feel seen, truly seen, in a way that most people's frantic chatter never achieves. These people have discovered something that most of humanity spends a lifetime searching for without ever finding it. They have discovered that the deepest form of communication is not words. It is presence. It is attention. It is the quality of consciousness you bring to every interaction. And paradoxically, the less you clutter that consciousness with reactive thoughts, defensive narratives, and compulsive speech, the more powerful and impactful your communication becomes. Seneca captured this beautifully when he wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." And one of the ways we waste it, perhaps the most insidious way, is by spending our precious mental and emotional energy reacting to things that do not deserve our attention. Every moment you spend angry at someone who disrespected you is a moment stolen from something meaningful. Every hour you spend replaying a hurtful conversation in your head is an hour you will never get back. Every day you spend obsessing over someone else's opinion of you is a day you did not spend building the life you actually want. This is the hidden cost of reactivity. It is not just that your reactions harm your relationships and your reputation. It is that they consume the most valuable resource you possess, your time and attention, and redirect it toward things that do not matter, toward people who do not deserve it, toward battles that were never worth fighting. I want to paint a picture for you. Two people experience the same event. Someone at work makes a snide comment about them in front of their colleagues. Person A reacts immediately. They fire back. They argue. They spend the rest of the day fuming. They go home and complain to their partner. They lie awake that night replaying the conversation, thinking of better comebacks, imagining scenarios of revenge or vindication. The next morning, they wake up still angry. They go to work with a chip on their shoulder. They are short with their colleagues. Their productivity suffers. Their mood is dark. The snide comment, which took 3 seconds to deliver, has now consumed over 24 hours of their life and polluted every interaction they have had since. Person B hears the same comment. They pause, feel the initial sting, they recognize it, they breathe, they choose not to respond. They look at the person who made the comment with a calm, steady gaze that communicates more than any words could. And then they continue with their day. They do not dwell on it. They do not replay it. They do not construct elaborate revenge fantasies. They acknowledge the moment, extract whatever useful information it might contain, and let it go. By that evening they have forgotten about it. Their energy has been spent on things that actually matter: their work, their relationships, their growth, their peace. Now tell me, which of these two people is more powerful? Which of them is truly free? The answer is obvious when you see it laid out like this. But in the heat of the moment, most people instinctively become person A, because nobody taught them how to be person B. Nobody showed them that there was another option. Nobody explained that the greatest power is not in the ability to destroy those who oppose you, but in the ability to remain untouched by their opposition. There is a concept in Japanese philosophy called ma, which refers to the power of negative space, the meaningful emptiness between things. In Japanese art, architecture, and music, the spaces where nothing exists are considered just as important, sometimes more important, than the spaces where something does. The pause between notes gives music its emotional power. The empty space in a painting gives the eye room to breathe and find meaning. The silence between words gives conversation its depth. And in human interaction, the silence between stimulus and response gives a person their dignity, their authority, their freedom. This concept maps perfectly onto what the Stoics were teaching. Your power does not reside in your reactions. Your power resides in the space between the event and your response. That space is where you live. That space is where you decide who you are. And the wider you can make that space, the more freedom you have, the more options you see, the more deliberately you can choose how to show up in the world. Most people have no space at all. The event happens and the reaction follows instantaneously, automatically, unconsciously. They are stimulus-response machines, biological robots running on programming they never chose and never examined. But when you begin to cultivate silence, when you begin to practice the art of non-reaction, you start to expand that space. You start to slow down the process. You start to see the gap between what happens to you and what you do about it. And in that gap you find yourself. Not the self that was constructed by your upbringing, your culture, your traumas, your fears, but the self that exists beneath all of that. The self that observes, the self that chooses, the self that is at its core free. Let me address something that I know is on many people's minds. What about when silence is not enough? What about situations where someone is genuinely threatening you, abusing you, crossing boundaries that cannot be ignored? And this is an important question, because there is a difference between wisdom and passivity, between strategic silence and doormat behavior. The Stoics were not doormats. Marcus Aurelius led armies into battle. Seneca navigated the most dangerous political environment in the ancient world. Epictetus survived slavery with his spirit intact. These were not passive men. They were men of tremendous courage, conviction, and action. The difference is that their actions were chosen, not reactive. They responded to the world from a place of clarity, not emotion. They knew when to be silent and when to speak, when to endure and when to act, when to absorb and when to strike. And this discernment, this ability to choose the appropriate response to each situation, is perhaps the most valuable skill a human being can develop. Silence is your default, not your only option. It is the starting point, not the ending point. It is the place from which you assess, evaluate, and decide. Sometimes, after silent assessment, the right response is a firm, clear statement of your boundaries. Sometimes it is removing yourself from a toxic situation entirely. Sometimes it is taking decisive action to protect yourself or someone you love. But these actions, when they come from a place of silence and reflection rather than impulse and emotion, are infinitely more effective, more precise, more powerful than anything you could do in the heat of reaction. Think of it this way. A sniper is silent before the shot. He is calm before the incision. A master chess player is still before the move. The silence is not inaction. It is preparation. It is the gathering of focus energy and clarity that makes the subsequent action devastating in its precision and impact. And this is the kind of silence the Stoics practiced. Not the silence of the helpless, but the silence of the powerful. Not the silence of the fearful, but the silence of the focused. Not the silence of the weak, but the silence of those who have so much power that they choose their moments with extraordinary care. I want to take you into one more layer of this, because there is something happening in the modern world that makes this philosophy more relevant than it has been at any point in human history. We are living in the age of provocation. Everything is designed to provoke a reaction from you. Social media algorithms are optimized to trigger your emotions because emotional reactions drive engagement. News organizations use outrage and fear to capture your attention because that is what generates clicks and views. Advertisers exploit your insecurities to make you feel inadequate so you will buy their products. Politicians use inflammatory rhetoric to mobilize you because angry people vote, donate, and share. The entire infrastructure of modern life is designed to keep you in a constant state of reactivity, to keep you angry, anxious, afraid, outraged, offended, defensive, never at peace, never at rest, never in control of your own emotional state. And every time you react, every time you take the bait, every time you engage with the provocation, you are feeding the machine. You are giving your attention, your energy, your time, your peace of mind to systems and people that do not have your best interests at heart. You are being harvested. Your reactions are the crop, and someone else is reaping the harvest. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the documented, well-understood business model of the attention economy. Your reactivity is currency. Your outrage is profit. Your inability to stay silent is someone else's revenue stream. And in this context, silence becomes not just a personal virtue but an act of rebellion. Choosing not to react, choosing not to engage, choosing not to feed the machine with your emotional energy is one of the most radical things you can do in the modern world. It is a reclamation of your sovereignty. It is a declaration that your attention is yours, your emotions are yours, your time is yours, and you will not give them away to anyone who knows how to press the right buttons. Epictetus said something that I believe is the single most important piece of advice for anyone living in the modern age. He said, "No person is free who is not master of himself." Read that again. No person is free who is not master of himself. Freedom in the Stoic understanding is not about external circumstances. It is not about having enough money, enough power, enough status, enough likes, enough followers, enough validation. Freedom is about self-mastery. It is about the ability to choose your responses, your emotions, your thoughts, your actions, regardless of what is happening around you. And in a world that is constantly trying to hijack your responses, your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions, this kind of self-mastery is the rarest and most valuable form of freedom there is. When you master the art of silence, you take the first and most important step toward this freedom. You learn that you do not have to react just because something happened. You learn that you do not have to engage just because someone provoked you. You learn that you do not have to defend yourself just because someone attacked you. You learn that you have a choice. And that choice, that simple, quiet, profound choice to respond from wisdom rather than impulse, to speak from clarity rather than emotion, to act from strength rather than fear, is the foundation upon which an entirely different kind of life can be built. Let me describe that life to you, because I want you to see what is possible on the other side of this transformation. Imagine waking up in the morning without anxiety about what other people think of you. Imagine going through your day without being thrown off balance by someone's comment, someone's look, someone's tone. Imagine having conversations where you listen deeply, speak thoughtfully, and never feel the need to prove yourself. Imagine being in conflict with someone and feeling, instead of rage or hurt, a deep curiosity about what is really going on beneath the surface. Imagine receiving an insult and feeling, instead of the usual sting, a quiet amusement that someone thought they could disturb your peace with mere words. Imagine lying in bed at night without replaying conversations, without rehearsing arguments, without worrying about who is upset with you or what they meant by that comment. Imagine a mind that is quiet. Not empty, but quiet. A mind that thinks clearly because it is not cluttered with reactive noise. A mind that sees situations accurately because it is not distorted by emotional turbulence. A mind that makes good decisions because it operates from principle rather than impulse. This is not a fantasy, this is a real, achievable state of being that thousands of people throughout history have cultivated through the deliberate practice of the principles we have been discussing. It does not happen overnight. It does not happen easily. It requires courage, patience, self-honesty, and a willingness to sit with discomfort rather than running from it. But it is possible. And once you taste it, even briefly, you will never want to go back to the old way of being. You will wonder how you ever lived any other way. You will look at the people around you, reacting to every provocation, lost in every drama, enslaved to every opinion, and you will feel not superiority but compassion. Because you will remember when you are exactly where they are, and you will understand with perfect clarity that the only difference between you and them is that you discovered the power of silence. There is a story about a Zen master that I think captures the essence of everything we have been discussing. A samurai came to the master and demanded, "Teach me about heaven and hell." The master looked at the samurai and said, "Why would I teach anything to a stupid, disgusting, contemptible soldier? Teach you? I would rather teach a dog." The samurai was enraged. He drew his sword and raised it above his head, ready to strike. The master looked up at him calmly and said, "That is hell." The samurai froze. He understood. Slowly he lowered his sword. Tears filled his eyes. He bowed deeply. The master smiled and said, "And that is heaven." This story is not about religion or metaphysics. It is about the choice that exists in every moment of your life. Hell is reactivity. Hell is being controlled by your emotions. Hell is letting someone else's words or actions determine your state of being. And heaven is the moment you recognize what is happening, lower the sword, and choose differently. Heaven is the space between stimulus and response. Heaven is the silence. And it is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not after you read another book or take another course or achieve another goal. Right now, in this very moment. The next time someone disrespects you, the next time someone says something cruel, the next time someone tries to provoke you into a reaction, you will have a choice. You can draw your sword, or you can lower it. You can react from your conditioning, or you can respond from your highest self. You can add more noise to a world drowning in noise, or you can offer something the world desperately needs: silence, composure, strength, peace. There is something else I want you to understand about this practice. Something that connects to the deepest layers of human psychology and the way we form our sense of self throughout our lives. From the moment you were born, you were trained to be reactive. As an infant, your survival depended on it. You cried when you were hungry and someone fed you. You screamed when you were uncomfortable and someone adjusted your environment. The louder and more intense your reaction, the faster your needs were met. This was appropriate and necessary at that stage of life. But here is the problem. Most people never outgrow this programming. They carry it into adulthood, unconsciously believing that the intensity of their reaction is directly proportional to the likelihood of their needs being met. They believe that if they are loud enough, angry enough, emotional enough, someone will pay attention, someone will take them seriously, someone will fix the problem. And in some cases this works, at least in the short term. But it comes at an enormous cost, because every time you use emotional intensity to get a result, you are reinforcing the belief that you cannot get what you need through calm, measured, deliberate action. You are strengthening the pattern rather than breaking it. You are becoming more dependent on reactivity, not less. And the people around you learn to respond only to your extremes.
Which means you have to become more extreme over time to get the same result.
This is a spiral that leads nowhere good.
The Stoics offered an alternative. They said,
what if you could meet your needs without abandoning your composure? What if you could advocate for yourself without losing yourself? What if you could be firm without being frantic, assertive without being aggressive, strong without being loud? And the answer they discovered is that not only is this possible, but it is infinitely more effective. Because when you communicate from a place of calm authority rather than emotional reactivity, people do not just hear your words. They feel your power. They sense your certainty. They recognize that they are dealing with someone who is not bluffing, not performing, not posturing, but genuinely, deeply, unshakably serious. And that is far more compelling than any outburst could ever be. I want to close with something that I think ties all of this together. in a way that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. The practice of silence in the face of disrespect is not really about other people at all. It is about you. It is about who you are becoming. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you are not just managing a social situation. You are sculpting your character. You are shaping the person you will be tomorrow, next month, next year, in the final moments of your life. You are making a statement, not to the world, but to yourself about what kind of person you want to be. And over time, those small statements accumulate. They build on each other, they create momentum, and eventually, they create a version of you that is fundamentally different from the person who started this journey. A person who is calmer, more grounded, more confident, more compassionate, more free. Not because life got easier, not because people got kinder, not because the world changed, but because you changed. Because you did the hardest thing a human being can do. You took responsibility for your own inner world. You stopped blaming others for your emotional state. You stopped waiting for the world to treat you the way you wanted to be treated. And you started treating yourself the way you deserve to be treated, with patience, with dignity, with respect, with the kind of quiet, unwavering love that does not need validation from anyone else. This is what the Stoics were really teaching. Not a set of techniques for dealing with difficult people, not a strategy for winning social games, but a way of being in the world that is rooted in the deepest possible relationship with yourself. A way of living that says, I am enough, not because someone told me so, not because I proved it, but because I know it. I know it in the silence. I know it in the space between what happens to me and what I choose to do about it. I know it in the calm center of my being that nothing and no one can touch. Marcus Aurelius wrote something near the end of his meditations that I think about often. He wrote, "Soon you will have forgotten everything, and soon everyone will have forgotten you." He was not being morbid. He was being honest. And in that honesty lies a freedom that most people never access. Because when you truly internalize the fact that none of this is permanent, that the person who disrespected you will be dust, that you will be dust, that every insult and every injury and every injustice will be forgotten in the vast indifference of time, something inside you relaxes. The death grip of ego loosens. The desperate need to be right, to be validated, to be respected begins to soften, and what remains is something pure, something essential, something that was always there beneath the noise and the drama and the endless human struggle for significance. Presence, awareness, the simple, profound experience of being alive, not of being respected or disrespected, not of being valued or devalued, not of being praised or criticized, just being. And from that place you can engage with the world without being consumed by it. You can love without being dependent. You can give without being depleted. You can live without being afraid. You can face disrespect and insult and cruelty and injustice, and all the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to, and you can meet them all with the same steady, quiet, unshakable calm. Not because you do not care, but because you care about something deeper. You care about the quality of your own soul. You care about the kind of person you are when no one is watching. You care about leaving this world with the knowledge that you mastered yourself, even if you never mastered anything else. So the next time someone disrespects you, pause, breathe, feel the silence inside you, and remember that in that silence lives everything you have ever been searching for. Not in the reaction, not in the comeback, not in the outrage, in the silence. That is where your power lives. That is where your freedom lives. That is where you live, and no one, not a single person on this earth, can take that from you unless you hand it to them. So stop handing it to them, go silent, go still, and watch how everything changes. Not the world. The world will continue to be chaotic and noisy and sometimes cruel, but you will change. And that is the only change that ever truly mattered. If this resonated with something deep inside you, if you felt even a moment of recognition, a moment of clarity, a moment where something shifted, then I invite you to stay on this path. Subscribe to this channel, because this is not entertainment, this is a practice. And every time you return, you go a little deeper, you see a little clearer, you become a little more free. I will see you in the next one.